Why would I go to luncheon? And why would it be spelled with an E-O-N instead of an I?
I don't even know what a luncheon really is. I'm sure I've been
No
to
one does. I don't think anyone actually does.
What's the difference?
It's just a fancy lunch. What's good? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Newest Olympian. My name is Mike Schubert. I'm the titular Newest Olympian. I am a grown man who never read the Percy Jackson books as a kid, but I read them as an adult because I was on a quest to determine if it was a book series that society had been sleeping on. I said yes, and now I'm seeing if society has also been sleeping on the Heroes of Olympus series, and I'm joined on this quest by a very special guest because I'm never on this quest alone. I'm joined today by an entertainment reporter from Comicbook, as well as the host of Riptide Radio. It's Liam Crowley. Liam, how's it going?
Mike, it is so good to hear your voice again. It is so good to see you again. I feel like we are back in December 2023, and I'm stoked to be talking about Heroes of Olympus because if you recall, every time we spoke on this podcast or in person before this episode, I had to bite my tongue on super cool Heroes of Olympus things, and I still have to bite my tongue on the majority of them because we're only talking about The Lost Hero today, but I'm excited to get to see you experience this awesome series in real time.
Yeah, I'm very excited. It's a fun phase of my Percy Jackson fandom and friendship where I know enough to have relevant conversations, and it's not just like, oh, you can't talk about anything with me. Now it is the fun and frustrating thing of, oh, well, he knows enough to know what's going on, but we can't talk to him about all the cool stuff yet. And especially now I'm like halfway through The Lost Hero. So it's like, okay, he knows that these new characters exist, but he doesn't know much about them. So I do look forward to the day when I fully know everything and we can have a big spoiler-free conversation about all this stuff. But who knows, man? Because there's Trials of Apollo, and then there's all the spin-off books, and then there's the Kane stuff, and then there's the Magnus Chase stuff. Thankfully, I'll be doing this forever, I think.
Yeah, you have so much content to get through in a good way, too. Like, enjoy this journey. Don't rush through anything. No. I remember when I first read Heroes from books 1 through 5, I read them in the span of like 2 months, and it was great because it was COVID. There was nothing else to do. However, part of me wishes I got to read them 1 year at a time, you know, and really dissect each chapter. I think you're doing it right.
Yeah, well, look, I am fortunate to be in the position I am. And I know that for Heroes of Olympus, it's very much a let's blitz through all of the chapters kind of thing because it's very cliffhangery. Kelly did the same thing. She breezed through them very quickly and then reread them again more slowly because she basically forgot everything. But yeah, really quickly, before we get into chapters 19 and 20, what is your history with the books? Was it just, as you said, a COVID read? You know, when did you finally read those versus finishing the Percy Jackson books?
So it's funny, the Percy Jackson books, everyone knows my origin story at this point with them, you know, read them in elementary school and all that. When Lost Hero first came out, I remember buying it and owning a hardcover copy of it. And I know I read it, but I know I misremembered the events of it in the sense of like, I remember Percy being in the first chapter on a school bus, which is not at all what happens in the first chapter.
Yeah, it's like half correct. It's Jason on the school bus.
Yeah, exactly. So there's like a weird like misremembering of the Lost Hero specifically. But I do remember the reason why I didn't finish the Heroes of Olympus series was because it came out while I was in middle school or starting middle school. And once you hit middle school, Mike, reading isn't cool anymore, apparently. And I was a follower back in the day. I can admit my faults. I carve my own path now. I talk about superheroes and men in tights playing wrestling, fighting for a living. So like, I don't care.
It's a very spandex-centric life you have.
It really is. And like nowadays I march to the beat of my own drum. But back in middle school, it was like, oh no, you like sports and reading isn't cool. And I was like, yes, sir, I will follow that. So I only ever read Lost Hero when it first came out. Didn't read Son of Neptune, Mark of Athena, House of Hades, and Blood of Olympus until COVID hit in 2020. Me and my friends were like, we don't want to just stare at screens all day because we're going to make our eyes bleed.
Right.
Let's start a virtual book club. So we read the first 5 Percy Jackson books, revisiting them, which was awesome to get to experience that again for the first time since I read them for the first time in middle school. And then we segued that straight into Heroes of Olympus. It was so much fun to get to go through these books after immediately coming off of the Percy Jackson books because it literally felt like watching a serialized story and, you know, just reading it and having that awesome experience with it. And it was a little bit of an adjustment to have like the shifting perspectives and technically be reading in the third person, even though each chapter is through a specific character's eyes. but I learned to love it because it makes the series feel a lot more cinematic than just the first person Percy perspective. So I have a lot of love for Heroes. I think each book is better than the last, except for Blood of Olympus. That's not necessarily a knock on Blood of Olympus, but like House of Hades is just really that good. And yeah, if you think you're having a good time halfway through Lost Hero, you're in for a fun ride.
That is the general impression that I have gotten, and I am having a very fun time in the Lost Hero, so I look forward to what's ahead. And yeah, I think what's fun about having the little difference in the characters we're following and the narration style is that it makes it feel still part of the same universe, but not just like, oh, they're just trying to do more Percy. Like, it feels different enough where it's got its own distinct kind of memory and its own place in the universe. But it's still a lot of the same characters, a lot of the same story. And I'm sure once they find Percy, I'm sure he'll get fully in the mix, and then it'll be all sorts of fun. But for now, we are here to discuss chapters 19 and 20 of The Lost Hero. Where we last left our heroes, they were going into the big fancy room to talk with King Boreas. And we are now switching to Jason's perspective. We've got chapter 19, which is called Jason. But of course, as we do here on the News Olympian, we will rename this chapter by the end so you can start getting the gears turning of if you gave it a quirky PJO-esque title, what would it be? Which will be quick because chapter 19 was quite short, and then chapter 20 is a little beefier. This chapter, like every chapter in The Lost Hero, starts with a banger of an opener. It says, quote, Jason didn't want to leave Leo, but he was starting to think that hanging with Cal the hockey player was the least dangerous option in this place. And the banger here is that Jason's a good friend. I love this. I love that he is considerate. This is one of my favorite things about Percy. So for Jason to be similar and have thoughts and empathy for his friends, I absolutely love it. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, Jason's got a natural good guy about him, which is so funny because it's like, it has to be natural because of where he's at in his life at this point. Like, he doesn't know who he is. So anything he acts on instinctually is like, well, these are just the good qualities that he's born with, which makes him an easy to root for hero, but also consequently, as I'm sure many of your listeners have pointed out to you, makes him a little bit bland at the same time too. I'm glad he's a good person. I'm glad he's looking out for his friends, but we like our heroes to have a little bit of an edge. And I think Jason is still finding that for himself.
Yeah, I'm trying to withhold any sort of judgment about him being anything more than just kind of like your cookie cutter hero, because he has no idea about his history. He doesn't know what's going on. So I'm going to give him the grace to where he can show a little more personality once he figures out what's going on. But I do like that at the very least, we have this core of a good stand-up dude, and I'll take that for sure. So what we have here is Leo staying behind and Jason and Piper going through. So they make their way up the icy stairs with Zethys behind them, holding them at sword point, and the Ice Princess leading them, occasionally turning to Jason and smiling, but not in a way of happiness or compassion. It feels more in a way of intrigue. Jason describes it as if she is excited to experiment on him, like he's in a science lab or something.
Yeah, the whole relationship with Jason and Keone is I don't know exactly how to describe it because I don't know if like she's hitting on him or like what she wants from him, but it's very clear that she sees someone who's like supposed to be a great hero, but is so vulnerable because he doesn't know who he is and he's so new to this world that she's like looking to kind of impose her power a little bit because, you know, she's the goddess of snow. Like, she's not any slouch, but also recognizes when there's an opportunity to impart her will. And I think she's doing that with Jason right now.
Yeah, I can see it. Now, what Jason thinks about these lovely chaperones they have is, quote, if these were Boreas' kids, Jason wasn't sure he wanted to meet Daddy, which is very fun. He fears that he has led his friends into a death trap, and he ends up grabbing Piper's hand for comfort without even thinking about it, which is a little bit spicy. We know they've got an interesting situation going on. Piper raises her eyebrows, but doesn't let go, which has huge, I'm not going to argue with the results energy. And I love this from Piper.
Yeah.
It's very relatable.
And I also love too that when Keone gives that look back at first, you're like, oh, she's jealous because she likes Jason. But then it comes with the, no, you're creating warmth right now. And that's not okay in this like ice kingdom we have going on. I thought that was really, really smart writing.
Yeah, it's very fun to have the figurative warmth become literal warmth and thus a concern for Icetown. That's exactly what she says. And she warns you definitely don't want to be showing warmth when the best chance of getting out of here alive is me, the Ice Princess. So as they walk, Jason thinks back to the photo of Thalia that he had been staring at in the Zeus cabin and then on Festus, and it eats him up that he has a sister out there somewhere who may have answers about his past, but he's unable to talk with her. And he notes that she looks nothing like him. Dark hair, a Mediterranean complexion, and sharper facial features like a hawk. And I guess Jason's are more like an eagle because he's an American. My recurring video is that he is just apple pies, Ford F-150s, blue jeans. It's an interesting thing. I like Rick's way of describing people. I also don't know that I know exactly what it means for someone to have hawk-like features and a Mediterranean complexion. I'm like, okay, I guess like olive skin and a pointy nose? Question mark?
Yeah, because I glanced past that so quickly, but hearing you describe it, I don't really know what a human hawk looks like. I honestly don't really know what different predatory birds look like. Like you said hawk, and I'm picturing in my head, I'm still seeing like an eagle beak when I think of a hawk. And so then I can only think of like the falcons, not the falcons. The falcons are a different type of bird. The Atlanta Hawks.
Right.
And the Atlanta Hawks logo is kind of just like a red eagle.
I was about to say the only context I have for what various birds of prey look like is how accurate are their sports logos, because I know the sports logos, but I don't know how accurate they are, and that's my only thing to go off of.
Yeah, the Eagles and Hawks basketball have a very similar beak.
Oh, well, yeah, we'll do a case study of all the birds and how there should be a team called the Pigeons, but even still, Thalia does look familiar to Jason, and he feels confident that she is his sister, but he was surprised to see how shocked Annabeth was at this news. It's as if Thalia never mentioned him. So now I'm wondering, we do know that Hera has messed with Jason's memories. I wonder if Hera has also messed with Thalia's memories so that Thalia doesn't remember Jason. Either that, or maybe it's a really sore subject, whatever happened, because Jason's her younger brother. I don't know how they got separated, if they did. So there's a lot of different things, but I wonder if Hera messed with her too, since she would also be a child of Zeus. So maybe Hera has that complicated relationship with Thalia as well. I don't know. And we got to keep your spoiler trapdoor intact, so we will move forward. But no matter what happens, I do love Rick's usage of memory stuff, I don't know, is just a great book trope that I'm fully in favor of. Like, whatever happens, I love, yeah, he's Thalia's brother. It's like, cool, like, sure, I don't care how ridiculous you have to find the workaround to be, because at the end of the day, this guy has a coin that turns into a sword. So anything is on the table. Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah, I don't want to say like revisionist history, because I think Rick is really good about writing new elements that honor the canon of what came before it. But yeah, it's Greek mythology at the end of the day. So like there are a lot of like easy narrative loopholes you can do to weave things in. But I will definitely say, like I said, because my first time reading these books was immediately after reading the first 5 Percy books, I cannot recall like a single moment that stuck out as like, oh, well, that clearly was retconned or that was changed around. Like, it all feels like it flows like the hero's books were almost in mind when he was writing the original Percy.
Right. I have not found that to be a thing yet. I will see. I am impressed because it does all feel very intentional. And I think it was in the interview I did with Stephanie Laurie, Rick's editor, that Rick doesn't necessarily keep like a big Bible of all of the stuff in the universe. I think he just kind of either remembers it or honestly probably uses like the fan wiki. So that's impressive if he is able to kind of pull that off without making any sort of huge retcon. But yeah, so far, nothing has felt weirdly forced, and we don't get a thing that bugs me where it's like, oh, this person actually lied to you. We haven't gotten anything that feels really cheap. And yeah, if you're going to use the Greek mythology loophole, go for it. It's a Greek mythology book. Like, it's fine. We can make things work. There's literal magic, so we can have memories be deleted. Sure. Jason resents Hera for taking his memories and then forcing him to save her just to get them back. He wants to just let her rot out of spite, but he knows that he can't do it, sure, because of the world and stuff, but also he's really curious about his memories and he wants to know what's going on. So he's intrigued enough to save her.
And I think what's cool too about how they play Jason, like getting in his mind, is like, well, we, the reader, are also thinking that, because Jason has secrets within his mind that he can't unlock that tell us so much more about this world, and also like changes the way that we look at this world with like what will get revealed to just naturally, because what will get revealed is stuff that happened in the past. So I like the idea of like, there's definitely a narrative technique. They do this in movies all the time where like we as the audience know the same amount as the main character. It's not a situation where we know that the ghost is in the closet and the main character is going to the closet unaware. Like, we are experiencing the story in real time with Jason, and I think that makes for something very unique.
Yeah, and it's also fun because with that, we get a little bit of a rhythm in these chapters where you'll have bits of dialogue or bits of action, and then usually a chunk of, well, whoever the narrator in this chapter was had a bit of a think, and usually it kind of covers any of those things that you're wondering. So I feel like in these books, more so than the Percy Jackson books, I'll take notes where I'm like, I wonder what's going on, and then 3 sentences later, Jason's like, I wonder what's going on. So I feel a lot of the times I'm on the same page. So you're totally right. It's nice that the characters and the reader can kind of be on the same page. Piper can tell that Jason is zoned out, so she asks if he's okay. He says yes. Jason then thinks about how happy he is that Piper is here. He knows and realizes that he needs a friend in this moment, and he's glad that Piper is here. He's also glad that the Aphrodite blessing is fading because Piper's looking more and more like herself, and to Jason, more beautiful, which I think is a nice instinct. I know I've heard the critique of Rick's writing that all of the women that we are supposed to think are cool are all the like, well, I don't like makeup. I'm not like a girly girl. Like Annabeth is like that. Thalia is like that. And now Piper's like that. So I don't know if it's like a little bit of trope territory, but I do still think it's probably good that Jason is someone that, even if it's about like a makeup versus not makeup, he wants Piper just to be herself. And I think the instinct of having people be true to themselves and not putting on any sort of mask, I think that's good. I would also just love to see if there was a girly girl that we liked. I guess we had that with Selena, but then she became evil and died. And we clearly don't like Drew. But, you know, maybe we could get someone who is more of like the stereotypical would-be liked girl, but we also think she's cool, as opposed to every girl being, I'm not like other girls.
That's a good critique. And also too, like, again, it just kind of plays into Jason having like good guy natural instincts of like, you know, not having to do more than you already are for me to like you and stuff like that. But again, because Heroes is a little bit faded, and this is a comment that is speculatory, not spoilery, because I don't even know the answer. Sure. I think Piper is one of those characters, though, that doesn't necessarily shun the Aphrodite side of her, because I remember her in later Heroes books just like embracing some of those qualities. And I can't specifically recall if they are like beauty qualities and like makeup stuff like that, but I don't think, in terms of like the tomboyish female characters like in the entire Percy world, she is definitely like, if Talia is the most like anti-girly girl and like Annabeth is somewhere in between, I wouldn't even put Piper in that conversation. So I can't say she's fully committed to like the girly girl side. I would say she's a very polar opposite from a Talia or an Annabeth.
Yeah, and she's definitely embracing the Aphrodite powers for sure, as we will see in these chapters.
Charmspeak is the greatest ability in Percy Jackson. I'm not like that. I will defend that till the cows come home, or whatever the saying is. Like, I think it is the coolest thing to just be able to like, because I have friends who are like in sales who use Charmspeak without even knowing it. And I'm like, I just think it's like the coolest technique to just like, you know.
Why are we going to this place for pizza? I wanted to go to Di Lorenzo's.
Yeah, but you really convinced me that this 2-star joint is going to be the best experience of my life. And I don't know how you did that, but like, teach me your ways. It's the coolest thing.
Yeah. No, I think it's good. And I think this is going to come up a lot just in the notes that I took, but in the D&D that I've been playing with the streaming that I do 20 to midnight, I play a bard who's very good at talking his way to situations, and that's very helpful. And now I've been playing Baldur's Gate 3, which is basically Dungeons and Dragons, a game, and my character is good at speaking, but not as much. I'm playing a rogue this time, and every time I can't talk my way out of a fight, I'm thinking, man, I wish I could just talk my way out of a fight. Like, sure, having water powers and a cool sword that begins as an inanimate object is awesome, but you know what the best way to win a fight is? Not ever let it begin. So Charmspeak can go a long way. So anyway, Percy Jackson, Jason is more convinced that he doesn't know Piper and that their relationship was all the mist, but now he's really wishing that it was real because he is enjoying being around Piper. I think this relationship dynamic is super fascinating. I cannot wait to see where it goes. It is very interesting.
I don't know why this light bulb just went off in my head when you said Piper this time, but I'm realizing now. The last time I read Heroes, like I said, was COVID. It was like March of 2020, maybe more May of 2020. In December of 2020, my family got a dog, and my dog's name is Piper. So this is my first time reading or hearing the name Piper spoken in a Percy Jackson context where I'm now also thinking of my dog, because like when I read it the first time, Piper wasn't in our life. And it's just like, it's funny when you just said it there. I was like, oh wait, why am I thinking of my dog right now? Oh, that's right. My dog's name is Piper.
Amazing. Amazing. Jason stops himself from thinking this though, because it's not fair to Piper since he has no idea what family or relationships he has waiting back home. And him having an existing significant other would be wild. And I'd be so here for it. Like, what if he's already dating someone? What if he's dating a dude? Like, what if he's Gayson? Or like, what if it's just like, oh, hey, by the way, you don't remember so much of you. Like, anything's in play. It would be ridiculous if it just, you know, he actually left a girl back home or whatever. Oh, man, there's so many opportunities. I'm so stoked to see what happens. Yep, zipped the lips. He wonders.
I don't even want to like anything you say about future things. I don't want to say anything because you might take it in a way that is not how I meant for you to take it, or I might try to deceive you and then you end up like, I don't know. So yes.
It's smart. It's smart. It is very smart. And I don't envy the guests who have to be interesting as guests, but also not destroy my job. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Jason wonders about what will happen after the quest if they even survive, but he does feel like he is not destined for Camp Half-Blood, which I do know of the other camp that is being referenced, or at least the Jupiter side of things is being brought in more and more. So I that's not news to me. They reach the end of the hallway and face a large wooden door with a map of the world and the 4 wind gods carved into it. The Ice Princess informs them that it is the throne room. She warns Jason to be careful and says that she will translate. And I was wondering, is this guy just going to speak in wind noises or something? We will see what happens. She says that she hopes Jason is spared by the wind god because, quote, we could have such fun, which creeps Jason out, understandably. And he says, this should just be a quick chat and then we're going to leave. And the princess says that she loves how ignorant heroes are. Piper puts her hand on her dagger and tells her to enlighten them, starting with her name. The princess is displeased, but tells them her name is, I would have guessed Keone, because they usually do like the long E at the end of Greek names, but I will talk to our myth correspondent, Dr. Moya, and see if it is Keone or Keone. I don't know.
I've always read it as Keone, but I also used to read Luke Castellan as Castellian, even though there's no I. So I'm unreliable.
Yeah, that feels like Berenstain Bears, where you just like change it to something that feels more right. Because I've definitely had the Castellian instinct before, but now according to that reel that Uncle Rick did, it's Castellan. So everybody's wrong. No one has ever been correct. So the doors then open and she leads them through, saying that she hopes they survive. And that is like the 6th time that someone has said this. So I'm starting to get worried about it. And that's the end of chapter 19. The fun, quirky title that I would have given it is I would have given a nod to Boulevard of Broken Dreams and call it I Walk This Empty Hall.
I like that. That's clever. I don't know if I can top that. I'm trying to think right now.
It's hard because it's a really short chapter and all they do is walk down a hallway and Jason thinks about stuff.
I guess the big reveal is that her name is Keone. So maybe a pun with Keone, something, I don't know why I'm thinking like end zone.
Ooh.
Keone of interest, like zone of interest.
Yeah. I like it. Look, I love a pun. I love it. It's great. Cool.
But then I can't say Keone because then that spoils the reveal of her name at the end of the chapter.
That's the thing that I didn't have enough respect for Uncle Rick. You know what's really hard? Coming up with chapter titles. It's so hard. And now I've locked myself into doing it, I guess 50 plus times for 5 books. It's so hard. It's honestly one of the things that takes the longest when I prep for these episodes. It's like, oh man, what's a good thing that doesn't spoil anything but does enough intrigue? Power to Rick. I can see why he stopped doing it after doing it for 5 books.
I think we go with your title. I'll think of one during this next discussion of chapter 20.
Cool. We'll take our break here. The Lost Euro, and then we will come back to discuss chapter 20. Hello and welcome to the Lost Euro Shubio edition. Once again, got some podcast updates for you. First up, we are off next week. July is a 5-Monday month, so I was going to take one of the Mondays off, and next Monday makes the most sense because I've got a lot of stuff going on in the old life. You know, the new baby, I'll be on tour. Sherry and I just in general need a bit of a catch up, so we're going to be taking next week off. I'll still be posting something to the feed, probably just a little tiny audio thing explaining what charitable organization that we are giving to, but there's not going to be a full episode. I'm going to try to put up a Potterless episode at some time in the near future, future. So there will be some sort of book-related Mike Schubert content in your feed, in your ears, but not a full TNO episode. I did just mention tour. Tour, what's that? That's right, I'm going to be on tour. Tour is coming soon, and whether you live in the Pacific Northwest or you have access to the internet, you can be a part of the tour. That's right. I've got live shows in Seattle on July 3rd, and then also in Vancouver, British Columbia on July 8th. But I will be filming the shows and putting them up on the Patreon for anyone who has joined a TNO tier. Once I finish the live show, I'll try to edit the video together pretty quickly and put it up so you'll be able to hear my thoughts on those later chapters weeks before the public, and also you'll get to see my physical reactions and stuff. It'll be really fun. So if you just join any TNO tier of the Patreon, you'll get access to those videos. And then in addition to those 2 live shows, I will also be at LeakyCon in Portland, Oregon, July 5th through 7th. There will be TNO stuff that I do. There will be Potterless stuff that I'll do. There will be other stuff that I do. If you want to see what's being covered at all of these different things, I have shared an infographic on the TNO Instagram account, which is at Newest Olympian. I'll probably tweet it out if I haven't already. And also, speaking of sharing images in the Patreon, I did give merch previews of our upcoming merch items. They are posted. The work in progress images are posted on the Patreon. If you join any of the TNO tiers, you would have access to that as well. It's something I do from time to time, so if you want to be in the know, you can join the Patreon. But speaking of the Patreon, I want to give a shout out to the folks who've joined the Patreon team at thenewestolympian.com/Patreon most recently. So shout out to our newest Super God tier patron, Barbarossa, and shout out to our newest Demigod tier patrons, Hyacinth Porter, Breakfast and Beauclair, and Dylan Pelosi. Dylan, I'm sorry that I made fun of your name in one of the earlier episodes. I'm sorry to all the Dylans out there, but especially you, Dylan Pelosi, because you're supporting me on Patreon. Thank you all so much for your support. May Aphrodite bless you that if you are ever trying to find just the perfect accessory that will complete your outfit, that you are able to find it quickly without having to rummage through various drawers and stuff in your closet. Now, if you're caught up on the Newest Olympian and you're looking for a new podcast to listen to, you are in luck because I make a whole bunch of podcasts. I think they're very good. I'm very biased, but I think you would like them as well. If you like me, there's another show that I make and I host, and there's a bunch of fun guests on it, and it supports charity. It's called Meddling Adults. It is a podcast game show for charity where I host, guests compete to solve children's mysteries from things like Scooby-Doo, Encyclopedia Brown, Nancy Drew, Cam Jansen, Shelby Woo. A bunch of fun mystery series have been covered. I recap the mysteries. The guests try to figure out who did it, and whoever gets the most right, or who gets a whole bunch of comedic bonus points, whoever has the high score at the end earns money for a charity of their choosing. I've got 4 full seasons up. I'm in the production right now of season 5, and you can listen to every single episode at meddlingadults.com or by searching for Meddling Adults wherever you get your podcasts. Now, unless you are listening on Patreon, where you get access to ad-free episodes, you will now hear words from a few sponsors who make it feasible for me to be a full-time podcaster. Some of those ads will be read by me. For example, one would be from our new sponsor, Field of Greens, who is a really cool fruit, vegetable drink thing. But some of the ads won't be read by me. Those are inserted locally. So if you live in Bangladesh, don't be surprised if you hear an ad in Bengali. But once those ads are complete, we'll get back to this episode of The Newest Olympian. And we're back. We're here for chapter 20. It's also called Jason, but we'll retitle it. Here's how chapter 20 begins. Quote, if the entry hall had been cold, the throne room was like a meat locker. So Jason can't remember who his sister is or who he is, but he does remember that meat lockers are cold. Here we go, Jason. Yeah, he's seen Rocky Balboa, America.
I love the bit you got going on here, because that I guess that is meat locker. That is one of the first things I would associate with that, is not the summer I worked at a fish restaurant. But yeah, no. Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, no, look, and whenever I think of a meat locker, yes, I would also think of the fridge when I worked at Papado Seafood Kitchen, a Cajun restaurant with seafood as well. And yeah, that was the place that I would go into and scream when I was angry at all my patrons. That was the safe space of, you can close the door behind you and yell into the frozen items.
I've been there.
Gosh. So it's very snowy inside with the northern lights dancing on the ceiling like they're Lionel Richie. Jason thinks the room is adorned with statues of warriors, but then two spring to life to stop Jason's path at one point. So they're not statues. They're something else. We get this quote from narrator Jason. From the far end of the hall, a man's voice rang out in a language that sounded like French. And then I wrote, oh, so this is the translate thing. OMG, he's French Canadian? ? So I guess it tracks, and we learn a little bit more about what it is. Now, apparently, the French phrase that was said was Boreas commanding the guards not to kill them yet, which isn't good. You don't like when yet follows don't kill you. So hopefully it can just be a don't kill them at all, but we'll have to see.
I do like how Boreas is introduced. I like when villains or antagonists of chapters where they're clearly only meant to stick around for a little bit have other people talk for them. It really bugs me when these Z-list Greek mythology characters talk a big game and we know already that they're not going to be able to back it up. But it's easier when it's like, oh no, someone else did the talking for you. And when you inevitably don't back it up, I don't really blame you. I blame the people around you. And also it's cool because it shows like, well, you clearly do have some pull around here because you're in charge of certain people. So that does help immerse me a little bit more.
Right. If someone is talking on your behalf, that also does give you a little bit of power of, oh, okay, you're so important that you don't even want to explain who you are. Like, that's a pretty low lift thing to do. So you must be quite important if someone else is going to do your talking for you. Zethes, calling Jason Jason Jr., and Jason saying, please don't call me that, hurries them along because Boreas is not patient and Piper is losing her magic hairdo. He does offer to lend her something from his, quote, wide assortment of hair products. And as a hair guy, and you're a hair guy as well, that's high praise. I wouldn't just necessarily offer my best stuff to someone. Maybe I've got some other hair products that are either it's a lower stakes thing or if I just need to keep my hair out of my face and I don't want to use up the good stuff, yeah. But for him to just open the assortment, that's a pretty nice gesture.
Yeah. In this economy, too. Geez, I'm paying like 25 bucks for paste these days.
Yeah, gosh, no, thankfully, and they don't sponsor me. I've asked them about sponsoring me, but I use a layered cement clay, and it lasts me a very long time. It lasts me a very, I don't have to buy containers quite often. Usually the only times I would have to buy containers is when TSA PreCheck would say, no, thank you, you got to throw it out. And then I bought the travel, I finally committed to buying the travel size ones.
I cannot take that risk anymore because there have been times where it's like, the specific ingredients in it will allow it to get through TSA. There's other times I'm just like, I can't risk it anymore because I've had too many like $25, $30 hair products getting taken from me when I've used them like twice.
Yes, it's always when you used it twice. It's never when it's like almost empty. It is always when it's a fresh new one. It happened to me when I was on tour doing the Europe tour for the Noose Olympian. I don't remember what country it was in. Maybe leaving Amsterdam, entering Norway, something like that. Somewhere at TSA, they were like, no, this is too big because I think the tube is 125 grams and 100 grams is the max. And they were like, no dice. I think I even ripped off the label because the label said 125 grams and I ripped off the label and I was like, oh, I'll just tell them it's a 100-gram label. And that didn't even work. So then at that point, I had to like find a place in Finland that would sell it. And thankfully there was a barbershop where I actually ended up getting my haircut that did sell the stuff. So I got the stuff, but then from then on, I had to commit to, or I think it got stopped at one country. Then I bought it in Finland, ripped off the label. I was like, this won't happen again. And then I think at like the last leg, it got stopped again. So then I was like, that's it. I'm buying the little travel one. I know it's like not as good price-wise of, you know, the cents per ounce or whatever, but I keep throwing away so much unused product that surely it'll be worth the slight price hike for the tinier jar. And now I have the tiny jar for travel purposes.
And next time you're in Canada, just stop by Boreas's place.
Right? Like I would go to the Boreas barbershop. That'd be good. I mean, I had to find a new barbershop. I tweeted this out the other day. My normal barber that I go to in New York, I tried to make an appointment with him at the barbershop I go to, and he wasn't there. So I texted him. I was like, hey, are you not working at this place anymore? And he goes, no, they canned me for having too much sauce. And that could mean anything. That could mean anything. He could have shown up to work drunk. He could have gotten into an argument with the owner. He could have done something actually bad. I have no idea. That told me nothing. Absolutely nothing.
That is the greatest I got laid off excuse I've ever heard. They canned me because I have too much sauce. That is one of the things I'm dreading when I move to New York. I am like married to my barber. He's been my guy for 5 years. I don't want to have to find a new person. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, look, I am now in search of other places, so I can give you some recommendations. And, you know, maybe if this guy gets into a new spot where his sauce can flow free, you know, we can uncan the sauce. We'll see if that's a good spot. Anyway, Percy Jackson. So they proceed and the mist fades and it reveals a man in a white suit with purple wings sitting on a throne of ice. He has icicles in his beard. It's long and shaggy, but it's covered in icicles, which is a really cool vibe. His eyebrows make him look angry because they are arched, but there's a twinkle in his eye that gives Jason a hope that he may have some humor buried in there. And now having read this chapter, this is an incredible description of his physical vibe, kind of does give his exact personality vibe. Jason has a perfect read on him, a bit of an icy exterior, but he still has a bit of humor and levity deep within. It's a fun character. I like King Boreas. I would love for him to come back. He was really interesting to me.
Yeah, I didn't think he was too cocky either. I thought he was an appropriate amount of arrogant for the presentation he gave us of himself.
Totally. I am a king. I'm not a ridiculous king, but I am still a king. So come on. he starts speaking French, and thanks to the combination of me taking Latin in high school and, they use the same base language for French, and also the fact that I did 6 months in Paris where I would try to read the sports newspaper L'Equippe with my coworker Marianne every day at lunch, I can kind of roughly translate basic French by reading it, and it was a fun little experiment. So this is my rough translations. He says, "Welcome, I am King Boreas, and you?" And then Keone is about to translate, but then Piper steps up, curtsies, and says, "Your Majesty, I am Piper McLean, and this is Jason, son of Zeus." And King Boreas is hyped, replying, "You speak French very well." And then Jason goes, "Piper, you speak French?" And Piper goes, "No, why?" Which is hilarious. And Jason informs her that she just spoke French. She is confused, and the king says something else by the narrator. So this is clearly Rick tapping out, like, all right, I've Google translated 3 sentences. We're done here. And she then replies, "Oui, votre majesté," which is, "Yes, your majesty." And the king is giddy. He signals for Keone to step aside. Keone is about to translate what the king had said, but Piper jumps in to relay that the king said she's a daughter of Aphrodite. So of course she speaks French. And then I wrote, why? Because it's the language of love. And then literally a sentence later, it's because it's the language of love. And this is one of those things where it's like, yeah, sure, I'll take it. Like, this is fun. I don't care if this wouldn't make sense to someone else. I think it's great. I buy it. Let's roll with it. Super fun.
Yeah, and I don't remember if this is like an ability that she has that will come in handy later. Like, again, I don't think that is a spoiler at all, because it's like,
sure,
maybe we encounter more French people.
Maybe they go to Paris.
Maybe we don't. Who knows? But I love how it gets revealed in such a natural way, or even if you don't want to call this a natural way, it was written in a way for it to come up naturally.
Yes.
Because it bothers me to no end when character hidden abilities get revealed in a way that it's very clear you put them in that circumstance to reveal that they have this ability because it's going to be essential later. And this, like, avoids all of that. It's an ability that I don't think is necessarily essential. It adds another layer to her character and also just to who Aphrodite is as a goddess as well. And also it's a natural fit. They're in Canada. Of course, they're speaking French. Of course, French is the language of love. She's the daughter of Aphrodite. It all just makes sense. And it just makes it feel much more realistic. And it feels like we're living this story rather than we're reading a story and have to be like, okay, well, narrative hoops here.
100%. That's a really good point. It makes it feel more immersive because things kind of happen more organically as opposed to them talking about different Aphrodite abilities. It just kind of comes up. And I think it's cool because you're starting to see, I think it's a natural question to think, okay, how are Aphrodite powers going to help? We've seen charmspeak, that's pretty cool, but what's going to happen in a tense situation? And now we're seeing, oh, okay, she can kind of talk her way out in more ways than simply just using charmspeak, because we've learned that charmspeak doesn't work on everybody. So it's cool. And it's also neat because eventually I feel like, because we've got the 7 heroes, as the prophecy says, if we just had 7 people that were good at punching, it's not going to help. You need the diversity. To bring another Baldur's Gate 3 reference into the mix, like, do you really need Lysel and Karlach in the party? No. Like, do you need 2 people that are good with hitting people with swords? No. You need a wordsmith in there. So it's showing that we can have all 7, whoever the 7 end up being, and they can have very different skill sets. Annabeth can be the planner. Percy, I'm assuming, is one of the 7. He can do water stuff. Jason can do sky stuff. Piper can talk out of situations. Grover can play reed pipes. Like, we've got all the different things that people can do. Nico can brood in the corner. Everyone's got their different skill sets, and it's fun to see not just fighting being a cool thing. And I love it. Zethys laughs at Keone's translation services no longer being needed. She shoots him an icy look. Boreas sizes up Jason, so he bows, introduces himself, thanks Boreas for not killing them, and then asks why a Greek god speaks French, which I thought was a good question. Maybe it's not the most important question, but it is a good question nonetheless. Sometimes you just want to ask the more timely thing instead of the most important thing. It's fresh on the brain. You got to just say, okay, I know there's a bigger fish to fry, but why are you speaking this language? But Piper and King Boreas talk a little bit back and forth, but it's all not off screen, but the narrator just says they talked back and forth. So I don't think Rick speaks French. So it's just kind of fast forwarding through there. Piper relays to Jason that King Boreas speaks the language of his host country, as all gods do. And once she said that, I was like, oh, right. And then they make the exact point. The Greek gods speak English. They're not out here speaking Greek at Camp Half-Blood. So yeah, that totally makes sense. And that is just my English-centric, America-centric brain being like, very much in line with America Jason of like, well, yeah, everyone speaks English by default, and not realizing, no, it's weird that they spoke English, so it's less weird that he speaks French. It totally makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's also too, like, the books are written in English. So
yeah,
naturally, when characters have English dialogue after reading English words, like, it all just kind of flows, and it doesn't make you think twice about it until we have another language brought in. And so, like, it's funny, I just bought The Lightning Thief in Spanish. I came across it at a bookstore in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I had never seen, like, my goal is to own, like, all the different cover iterations of every Percy book. And The Lightning Thief is the easiest one to acquire. Like, I have the original, the reprint cover, the Logan Lerman cover. I came across that one recently.
Nice.
The TV show cover. Now I have the Spanish cover. And I really just bought it for the cover. But the reality is I also want to read it in Spanish to, like, kind of get that perspective of, like, how much does the story change in terms of how I'm taking it in when I'm reading it in a different language. And so this is actually a really good point about, like, yeah, you know, we don't think about the gods speaking in English until we are faced with a new language. So I wonder now, if I read it in Spanish, will I ever think it's weird that they're speaking Spanish? Right. It's like a weird, like, thing. But another point I want to make on that too is I always loved the narrative idea of, like, when Rick was immersing Greek mythology into the Western world and having to explain, okay, the gods have been here this whole time, but they originated in Greece. Where have they been for all these past millennia? And it's like, oh no, Olympus goes with the West. Wherever, like, the power is in the world, that's where the gods are. And I thought that was such a genius, like, very easy write-off to get us to understand why the gods are, like, assimilated into our world. And anytime they go back to that of, like, oh, well, no, he's speaking the language of his host country. I love that rule that he established, and I love whenever they revisit it.
Yeah, I think it's a great workaround. I remember making the critique in early episodes that it feels a little bit like there could be some problem stuff of, like, oh, well, you know, Western culture, blah, blah, blah. But, like, as far as, like, a workaround to make the book make sense, I think it's very quick and easy and simply done. But to get to your earlier point of the language thing, I wonder if you read the Spanish one or any other language, what would they say for this point? Like, would they have to, I wonder if they have to change the wording, or if you just have to assume that everyone has been speaking English, even if it is a French book or whatever. I have a copy. Someone gave it to me at the TNO live show we did in Finland, and it's either in Finnish or it might be in Swedish. I know that sometimes, even though it's Finland, like, Swedish is a very popular language for books to be sold there. So I don't know exactly what it is, but it's like all funky, cool words that I can't read. And I have that version on my bookcase out in the office there. So yeah, I wonder what happens in other language books. Anyone listening, feel free. Let me know what they say here. If they have to say anything, I don't think they would add anything. I think they would just have to say this, and then you as the reader would have to realize, oh, even though this book is in, you know, French, I probably understand that they've been speaking English the whole time in context in books 1 through 5. King Boreas then says something else that Piper is hesitant to translate, so Keone interjects, saying that King Boreas stated that he has orders to kill Jason. Jason asks why, and then King Boreas in heavily accented English, which is all I learned when I was in France. I didn't actually learn French because I worked at an English-speaking company since it was the international headquarters. So I got very good at just, like, mimicking French people speaking English. I don't think it's probably good anymore, so this will probably sound bad. But he basically says, because my lord Aeolus has commanded it. And then King Boreas, that was not my best. I used to be, I got to get back. That was like, I did stand up when I was in France. That was my bread and butter. French people love hearing American people make fun of French people speaking English. Like, it's a good cycle, which I would totally love. Like, I would love to hear a French guy here trying to do an American accent, like, and making fun of America. Like, give me that. It's great.
Oh, all my Irish cousins, because, like, I'm 100% Irish, and my entire dad's side of the family still lives in Ireland. They love making fun of the States. And, like, for whatever reason, like, it's not a fully committed Southern accent, but it's
everyone
like,
does it though.
They always make sure to have a drawl. They're always, but, like, they'll be talking about the Yankees because, like, I guess the Yankees are, like, the stereotypical American sports team. They're just like,
sure,
I love the Yankees, and I'm just like, we don't all talk like Valley girls or like Southern and I'm just like. But I also wish I had an accent. I don't feel like, I know we all technically have accents.
You've got it's certain words. You've got a little bit of, like, Boston stuff. Like, if you said like couch and roof and fire, I bet you would say all those, like, slightly differently.
Couch, roof, fire.
No, I said them all normally. I know, like, a Boston thing, if you say room, sometimes they say rum. You've definitely said it a couple of times, whereas next time I hear one, I'll say
I say draw. for like drawer.
Oh, like, yeah, for a drawer. Yeah.
I reached in my drawer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's definitely Boston heavy. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I like being able to speak where I'm from. I've never found accents to be like insulting. My mom has like a very like thick Quincy accent, which is a derivative of Boston. I guess it's like the same way people have like Brooklyn accents and Queens accents and stuff like that. And yeah, no, I wish all my cousins with their Irish accents, some of them live in Australia and have picked up Aussie accents, and I'm like, damn it, I want something cool.
Yeah, I don't think I have a particularly strong one. I used to have a stronger Northeast one, but then when I moved to Texas, people started making fun of me because I was on the basketball team. So I would say, oh yeah, I'm on the basketball team. Like I would do a lot of sharp A's. Like instead of Mario Party, I would say like, do you want to play Mario Party? Like that's a very like Italian Northeast thing. So I have a little more like neutral thing. I think it probably still comes through a little bit because every now and then someone will ask me if I'm from New Jersey just based on the way I speak. So I still think there's probably a little bit. And I know my mom has a thicker one, but I just like can't hear it, even though I know she for sure says like coffee. Like I know she definitely says it like that in her, she's from New Jersey, her mom's from New York kind of way. I think accents are fun. And it's also very fun when someone with a very sharp accent says they don't have an accent. I knew someone who was from Chicago and was like, I don't have an accent. And you're like, all right, Chicago. Thank you for your time. But anyway, Percy Jackson. So King Berenstain says, because my lord Aeolus has commanded it, then he rises from the throne and tucks in his wings. Chione and Zethes bow, so Jason and Piper follow suit. He says that he will speak their language because Piper did the same to him, or Rick doesn't speak French. So he tells Jason that his master wouldn't expect him to kill a child of Zeus without hearing him out first. Jason knows he can't fight his way out of this, so he instead approaches this in a more talking way. He asks why the Master of the Winds wants them dead. Boreas says it's because they are demigods, and demigods always cause him headaches. And apparently the Battle of Typhon last summer was the final straw, and then he makes a sheet of ice, like a flat screen TV, appear with the wave of his hand, and it shows the fight and the river gods swallowing up Typhon, in case you didn't read The Last Olympian. And Boreas explains the following quote, "The storm giant Typhon, the first time the gods defeated him eons ago, he did not die quietly. His death released a host of storm spirits, wild winds that answered to no one. It was Aeolus' job to track them all down and imprison them in his fortress. The other gods, they did not help. They did not even apologize for the inconvenience. It took Aeolus centuries to track down all the storm spirits, and naturally this irritated him. Then last summer, Typhon was defeated again." And Jason guesses, oh, okay, so this has created more Venti, and that makes Aeolus upset, and Boreas confirms, which I think is interesting. And I feel like it's probably something Rick knew, because going into book 5, we had that weird tiny little meeting with Aeolus where we had bad vibes, and it kind of felt irrelevant. And it now makes a lot more sense of this feels like Rick knowing if he makes another series, this guy's going to be in the mix, because it kind of felt like an editor would have said, why don't you just axe this thing where they talk to the wind guy and the wind guy's completely unhelpful and grumpy and stuff. So it feels planned. So it doesn't feel cheap. And I think it kind of makes sense. Why not?
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. When you plant a seed that can be sprouted, but also there's no harm done if like we leave it untouched. And I completely forgot about that till you just brought it up. Again, this makes it so much more interconnected.
There you go. That's all. Look, I have the luxury of having not taken too much time in between the books, so some things are more fresh. But also on the flip side, I have only read each book exactly one time, so I do forget details. Piper says the gods had no choice, then asks why demigods would take the fall for this. Boreas says that Aeolus cannot take out his anger on his bosses, the gods, so he has decided instead to get even with the demigods who assisted them in their war. Thus, he issued an edict that the 4 wind gods are not to help demigods who seek assistance, but instead kill them. Jason asks if they will first hear about their quest. Boreas says that he will allow it because Aeolus gave him the heads up that a son of Zeus may ask for assistance, and he should hear him out because he might make things interesting for them. Interesting, never a good word by someone who has the potential of killing you and the threat of it as well. Interesting is not a word you want to hear.
Interesting is just a bad word. Like as someone who writes, a lot of critical reviews, interesting and fun are like the 2 worst words to use. It either sounds like you're lying, like you actually did not like the thing you watched and you're just trying to give it some sort of positivity, or you're just not good at thinking of good, rich words. Interesting is bad news, no matter how you draw it up.
I appreciate that, and I do feel slightly called out, but I will admit to it that when I I'm in a conversation and someone says something to me and I don't want to hurt their feelings and I don't really know what to say, interesting is my go-to.
Oh, yeah, I do that all the time. There's no shade, but also we know what we're doing when we use the word interesting.
Yeah. No, I agree, though. You got to up the synonym game. Get out the thesaurus, find something fun. But anyway, Percy Jackson, Boreas clarifies that he is only promising to listen and still may kill him, which is a very funny king move for him to make. Jason sarcastically thanks him, and Boreas, not getting that this is sarcasm, says, "Oh, hold your thanks," because sometimes, quote, "make our lives interesting" means using the demigods for their entertainment, and then he gestures to the frozen statues. Jason is floored at this realization and asks, "They're alive?" And Boreas is unsure of their life status because they are frozen until they are given orders. And I guess if they melted, they would die, and that would be very messy. So just him being very nonchalant about imprisoning people. What does it mean? Just taking an interest in whether or not they are alive. The big questions that Black Mirror wonders with certain things, like, oh, is this sentient? Does that count as life? He's just like, oh yeah, I'm a king, so I don't really care about other people. This is the kind of king stuff that you mentioning earlier. I think you're totally right. You get the king vibes. He's still kind of bad, but not egregiously so, in an interesting way. But an actually interesting way, not a bad.
Yes. Good callback.
In an intriguing way.
For anyone who's listening, I'm sure one of your listeners has either watched or read Three Body Problem. I'm currently reading it. And so I don't know if they adapt this part of the book into the show. I don't want to know because, again, I'm reading it first and then I'll watch the show. But in Three Body Problem, there's a whole bit where they're playing this like VR game and it's set hundreds of years ago. And because the climate is so hot, they are able to dehydrate people's bodies and make them into like flat paper-like things and roll them up so that when the climate then changes to be livable, they can rehydrate them and then they become human again. So when I saw this like icicle thing, I was like, well, they're just frozen because of the current climate. And when the climate gets better for them, they'll be okay to live. And something Three Body Problem.
You said it was hundreds of years ago, not the future?
Yes, I think so.
Whoa.
Yeah, because they can't tell time.
Oh.
They use a scale to determine the sun patterns. But also it takes place not on Earth, the VR game. So
okay.
I don't know any of the answers. I have way more questions.
Oh, very interesting. Very interesting. I was just thinking as it gets unreasonably hot, it's, 95 degrees in mid to late June in New York. I just feel like the heat is in it for the future. And I look forward to when people listen to this podcast 80 years from now when I am on my deathbed. And then people are like, oh, it was only 90 degrees. It's 125 now in June. 90 was cold, you fool. So anyway, Percy Jackson. Keone puts her fingers on Jason's neck and he feels her icy touch. She says that her dad gives such lovely presents and then offers to let his friends go free if he stays with them. So here the truth comes out. She wants to keep him as a weird statue pet thing. Zethys is jealous, saying that if Keone gets one, then he should get the girl. He's jealous that she always gets more presents, and them just being bickering siblings is very funny and tracks for them being spoiled little brats since they are royalty and they are basically trust fund babies, totally makes sense. But Boreas tells them to stop lest they look spoiled. So they're on the same line of thinking that I was on.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I also appreciate too, whenever they have interactions that don't feel like they're just like clearly bickering for the sake of, well, we can't have the villain be in complete control. So like, let's make sure some of them like are not on the same page. This feels very natural.
Yeah, totally. Boreas also adds that they haven't heard Jason's story yet, so he asks Jason to share it. Jason starts to get nervous. Keone strokes his neck. Jason's skin then goes electric. This was an unplanned thing. And then there's a pop and it sends her flying across the room. Zethys laughs, saying he's glad Jason did that, even though he must kill him now. Keone gets up furious and begins to form a micro blizzard behind her. But then Jason tells her to stop, saying they won't kill them or keep them, and explains that they are on a quest for Hera. And unless they want to face her wrath, they will help them. And it does work. And again, to make another Baldur's Gate 3 reference, because I've been playing recently, this is something I wish I could do, because sometimes I'll be doing the conversation thing and I'll say something and it's like the provoke a fight dialogue line and I didn't realize I was doing that. It's like, oh, sorry. I didn't mean like, Like there's a specific thing where I just said something and I was like, well, you found me, and then you fight, and I'm like, oh, I didn't think we were gonna fight. I just thought I was talking crap. Like, I'm sorry. Then I have to kill them, and it's a whole thing.
You would fare very well in the Percy Jackson world. That is clearly, like, I can see Percy having that specific dialogue of like, well, I didn't mean it like that, but now we got to fight, and you know how this thing ends.
Yep. Of all the things that Percy does, talking trash in tense situations is the times I feel most seen, and I could definitely see it. Play any sport with me once you move to New York. Join my softball team or play pickup basketball with me or something. You will see it come out. I can't control it. It's a problem, but also a blessing. Who knows what it is? But then, because Jason has revealed this, Keone and Zethes end up stopping, and they turn to their father, basically to see how should we proceed. He instructs Jason to continue, noting he's intrigued by a son of Zeus that's actually favored by Hera. Jason struggles to find his voice, but thankfully Piper steps in and relays the entire story from chapter 1 to now perfectly. She concludes saying they only seek guidance in finding the storm spirits in order to learn the identity of this mistress for whom they work, and Boreas says that he knows the spirits, he knows where they are, and he knows their prisoner, and Jason checks, oh, you mean Coach Hedge? And he's very surprised that he's still alive, and Boreas confirms, but does say that it is a death wish to oppose the being who controls the Venti. So we've got a fight on our hands. We've got a foe to face. Jason says they have bigger concerns, those concerns being Hera being destroyed and a giant rising, and Boreas agrees that those are larger stakes. Then he shoots a look at Keone, and Jason wonders if this was an intentionally angry look, meaning it has to be that. And King Boreas says, many things are stirring, and his kids don't even keep him up on all the news that they should. And then I did write in my notes, what is this, too great, too stirring? Like, is this the sequel? And then he literally just says, the great stirring didn't end with Kronos' defeat. It is still going. The final battle has not yet taken place, and the one who will wake is more terrible than any Titan. So, again, another good trope of like, you thought you did it, but you didn't. I'm here for it. It's a sequel book in a YA series. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to go, well, you didn't actually beat them, and it's fine.
And I still love how, like, Kronos will always be, like, my, like, favorite final boss, like, probably out of just fiction in general. I love the character of Kronos, and also because Luke is one of my favorite characters ever written, and Kronos and Luke are so, like, synergetic as characters. But anything that goes on in Heroes, there are elements that make it feel like, okay, it's the sequel series, so it just has to be bigger. But I also appreciate that the ending of the Kronos battle, the Battle of Manhattan, breeds specific consequences that are followed in Heroes. Like, some stuff is bigger for the sake of being bigger because it's a sequel book and it's a team-up book, and if Percy is just the solo series, this is like their Avengers and all that. But there are elements that make it feel like, okay, well, at least we're building off the prior conflict and not just like shunning it completely.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense, and it feels more natural to be this situation of that big war wasn't everything. It was just most things, and it stopped one aspect, but not every aspect. That feels more natural than you had this big war and everything's done, and now here's somebody else, or the Star Wars, and somehow Palpatine returned. Like, it does feel more legitimate to say, yeah, you did a lot, but you didn't do everything, and stuff has been burbling, and the stuff that's left over is now going to continue that burbling. And it also does feel very in line with the Greek mythology, even specifically within the series. Monsters never truly die, so can you ever really relax? I don't think so. So there's always going to be that threat. So I think it's fine. I think it tracks. I like it. Boreas says the storm spirits are only the beginning. Quote, the earth has many more horrors to yield up. When monsters are no longer staying in Tartarus and souls are no longer confined to Hades, Olympus has good reason to fear. That is intimidating. He is making it sound very scary. He's doing a very effective job of this. Jason is unsure of what this all means, but he is sure that he doesn't like how much Keone is smiling at all of this. Then Jason asks, so you'll help us? And Boreas says that he didn't promise that. Piper asks, please. Everyone looks to her, but she still looks confident, Jason notes. So she's seeming like she's kind of coming into her own, which is nice. She then makes an offer. Boreas will tell them where the storm spirits are, and they will capture the spirits and bring them to Aeolus. It would make King Boreas look good to his boss, and then maybe the demigods can rescue Hedge and pardon other demigods, so it's a win-win all around. Seems like a pretty good offer. I think it works.
It tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zethes is in favor. Keone is not in favor, warning that it might just be charmspeak. Boreas thinks it over. Jason reaches for Fliptide, his coin, sword, spear. That's pretty good, right? I'm really proud of it.
Is that original?
Yeah, I think so.
I've never heard it before, but it's also so good that I'm like, how have I never heard it before?
I hope I am the person to say it. If someone else has said it, I would not be surprised because it does feel too perfect. But yeah, Jason, I'm just going to Google Fliptide and see if anything shows up, because otherwise I'm going to run to the trademarking office. Fliptide LLC is digital marketing solutions. And then Fliptide, no, nothing. I'm going to Google Fliptide Percy Jackson.
I bet it's going to say.
It's going to say Riptide.
Yeah.
Fliptide Heroes
sounds like a shirt to me.
Nothing. Yeah, baby, I've done it. Yep. Okay, great. Cool. There was a Reddit thread about someone saying that they don't like the coin flip as much as the pen click. That's the closest we got. So I think, or I guess not the pen click, the pen uncapping. But yeah, look, I should make Fliptide merch. That's great. Yeah. Thank you. I should totally do that, because I always fear making merch that is like, people are like, oh, you should make a merch that says anyway Percy Jackson, because I say that a lot in the podcast.
I was going to suggest that at the end of the show. I'm like, you should definitely make that shirt.
I want to, but I'm terrified. But I did look, and Percy Jackson is not actually a registered trademark. I looked on like the official trademarking thing, which is the same website where I have Wizard On trademark from my Potterless days, because Zappos tried to use it in an Instagram caption once, and then I got them to cease and desist. But when I looked, it was like an abandoned trademark, making me think that like maybe it's too generic of a name. Like Jackson is too common of a last name and Percy is too common of a first name where you can't register trademark it. I don't know. Like, and if you look at the stuff, like I've got Percy Jackson stuff behind me, there's no TM or R near Percy Jackson. I don't think it's technically a registered trademark.
If you're worried, I would also say you could just, because you say it so quick, but anyways, Percy Jackson, you could just spell it without spaces.
One word. Yeah. Ooh,
easy loophole.
That's smart. Yeah. Then I can say it's not a, but anyway, Percy Jackson. It is a boo Tani. Like I'll just it's no, it's actually blah blah. Yeah, I can at least get around to where the worst thing that could happen is a cease and desist, and not Disney getting all of the money, all of the money. But anyway, Percy Jackson. That's a good idea. I should make merch which is all one word. We've done it. We've done it. I'll make that and Fliptide merch. Check it out. If you're listening in the future, go to thenewsolympia.com/merch. Maybe it's already there. So. King Boreas thinks it over. Jason reaches for Fliptide, and when he reaches for Fliptide, this moves his jacket up enough where his forearm shows, and King Boreas notices his tattoo and asks about it. Jason shows it. King Boreas' eyes widen. Keone hisses and steps back, and Boreas then laughs uproariously. He then transforms into a more Roman-looking figure, toga, wreath combo, and everything, and then Jason addresses him as Aquilon without knowing how he knew that was his name. Classic instinctual Roman stuff from Jason. Boreas is confused that Jason is from Camp Half-Blood, but he knows him better in this form. But then his train of thought goes to Hera sending him, and then he realizes what Hera's game is, and he says that she is playing a bold and dangerous game and thinks that her game is so risky that is why Olympus is closed. He's doing a perfect job of not telling us what's up, but letting us know the stakes are very high. He's a perfect mid-book character to really kind of ramp up the intrigue while still telling us effectively nothing.
I love when Greek gods transform into their Roman side and vice versa. I just think it's the coolest thing. I think it is such a genius concept for a sequel book series to bring in Roman elements for one, but also just the way that it's like a personality shift almost. It's just like, I love it. It's great.
It's really fun. I'm excited to see if it continues to happen. Piper checks if Jason knows what's going on. Jason doesn't. Boreas says it will be very interesting to see what unfolds. Piper asks if that means he's letting them go. Boreas says, sure, because if Hera's plan fails, which he thinks it will, quote, you will tear each other apart. Aeolus will never have to worry about demigods again. And now I'm wondering, are we going to get a Greek demigods versus Roman demigods war? Are we going to get Camp Half-Blood versus Camp Jupiter? Like, I don't know. Tear each other apart feels very interesting. It feels more than just the people in this room tearing each other apart. It feels big picture, since he said, you'll never have to worry about demigods again. So if we're getting like demigods versus demigods, truly, as opposed to demigods helping the Titan army, that could be very fascinating. Could be very it could be very, in your line of work, very Civil War. Like if we get the Cap versus Tony, like, are we gonna get Jason versus Percy? Who? That could be intriguing.
Good way of avoiding interesting. Intriguing.
Intriguing. It's good. And you can stop yourself when you start to say the first syllable. Go, no. Like, into rigging. You can easily pivot. Jason feels like Keone's cold fingers are back on his neck, but he knows they're not there. It is instead the cold feeling of the dread of King Boreas being right. He's had bad feelings about Camp Half-Blood ever since being at Camp Half-Blood, and he knows that Boreas must know what the source of these instincts are. So he asks Boreas, will he explain this? And Boreas says, yeah, I don't want to interfere with Hera's plans. And then Chiron nods in the distance because the plot is staying intact and the book is continuing to be an interesting read. He says that he is a helpful wind god and even took a liking to mortals, citing that Zethys and Calais started as demigods. Keone says that's why they're idiots. Zethys claps back at her for being high and mighty since she started as a goddess. So we get the root of their jealousy, which is very fun. Boreas stops the bickering and says that he has a good reputation, but he rarely plays an important role in godly affairs. And then continuing, he says, quote, why, even that fool Notus the South Wind gets spring break in Cancun. What do I get? A winter festival with naked Quebecois rolling around in the snow? And I don't know if you're familiar with this festival, but I might have to check in with our Canadian correspondent from the previous episode, Jenna, to ask what is going on here.
Yeah, I have no idea.
It feels like a polar plunge kind of thing, like strip naked, roll around in the snow, put your clothes back on. That would be my guess, but I'm very intrigued. I don't know. Now up for the newest Olympian, the designated Canadian Jenna Buck.
Hi, this is Jenna Buck, the designated Canadian of the newest Olympian. So, what did Boreas mean when he said there's a festival where naked Quebecois roll around in the snow? Well, that would be Carnival. It's a traditional time in the late winter, I think traditionally just before Lent, to have winter festivals, including Ottawa's Winterlude and Quebec City's Carnival. And by that time, the winter's been dragging on long enough that people become a little unhinged. Carnival also has a delightful / scary mascot. He's a snowman, Bonhomme Carnival, and a event called Bain de Neige, or snow bath. It's not unlike a polar dip event. You sign up to dance and roll around and bathe in the snow for either 3, 5, or 10 minutes. This tradition only dates from 1987. I've never been, but as far as I know, it's not a contest or anything. It's just for fun. You're only allowed to wear a swimsuit, shoes, mittens, and socks, and everyone also wears matching hats. It's just good, clean Canadian fun.
That was the newest Olympian's designated Canadian, Jenna Buck. And then Boreas decides he will help them and tell them where to go next. And I couldn't believe it because it's so bad, but so good. I don't know how I feel, but the wind spirits are in Chicago, the Windy City. Like, Rick has to know it's not because of the wind, right? Like, Chicago's the Windy City because of politics, not because of literal wind. He knows this, right?
Wait, is that?
Did you not know this?
No, this is news to me.
Chicago's the Windy City because it used to like flip-flop back and forth between Democratic and Republican. And it was like a swing town in voting. That's why it's the Windy City. It's not because of literal wind, because like Illinois is not particularly windy.
Wow. I literally just learned that.
I wonder if, I'm sure a lot of people did, but I'll just quick Google. Well, okay, now here's something. I thought that's what it is. Someone does say that it being on Lake Michigan, because once I said Illinois is not particularly windy, I was like, but it's on Lake Michigan. That might not be true. Midwestern Career College says Chicago's infamous for strong and blustery winds. Yeah, maybe it is. It is very cold there. Maybe
It could be a double meaning though, because I know Chicago is also called the second city because two reasons. One, because it's like, well, New York was always number one, Chicago was number two, but also because Chicago like burned down one year and they built on top of it. So like it's the second city because it's built on top. So maybe it could be another double meaning situation.
Oh, okay. I think that is it, because if you go to Windy City nickname, the page on Wikipedia, there are 4 main possibilities for the city's nickname. The weather, as Chicago's near Lake Michigan, the rivalry with Cincinnati, the World's Fair, and politics. So weather, we've already discussed. Cincinnati rivalry is, let's see. Cincinnati, baseball stuff. Cincinnati is well known as the meatpacking trade and was called Porkopolis, starting in 1843. Starting in the early 1860s, Chicago surpassed Cincinnati in this trade and proudly proclaimed the same Porkopolis nickname. Why would that have to be Windy City?
Yeah, the Reds and Cubs, I think, have a rivalry.
Yeah. The 1869 Cincinnati Red Stockings were the pride of all baseball, so Chicago came up with a rival team called the White Stockings to defeat them. Windy City often appeared in the Cincinnati Sporting News. So Cincinnati called it, so then they wanted to call it that to copy them? Weird. There's a myth for the World's Fair. It is a popular myth that the first person to use Windy City as a term was New York Sun editor Charles Dana in a New York Sun article complaining about Chicago's victory in 1890 over New York in its bid to host the World's Fair. The term was in common use since at least 1886, while the first known use was from 1876. As Chicago did not win the bid to host the World's Fair until 1890, Dana cannot possibly have known the source of the term. So that's just wrong. So politics, yeah, it's because it flip-flops. Allegedly believe Chicagoan politicians were nothing but profit. Oh, no, just kidding. Not flip-flopping. 19th century journalists frequently referred to Chicago as the Windy City because they allegedly believe Chicagoan politicians were nothing but profit-centric. However, it's worth noting that the rivalry was between Chicago, a growing metropolis, and other cities such as New York, from where most journalists came. In other words, the Windy City is not a nickname Chicago gave itself, but rather something that the city has embraced over time. Ooh, we love reclaiming an insult.
Interesting.
Look at all this learning we're doing today on this Percy Jackson podcast.
I perked up because I'm also reading The Devil in the White City, which is about...
Oh, it's great.
You've read it?
Yeah. It's like half Chicago World's Fair,
half
potential murder mystery,
serial killer,
half architecture stuff.
Yes.
So all at the World's Fair, half murder mystery, serial killer, half architecture. I will say, and I've told this to my architect wife, but when I got about halfway through the book, I started skipping the architecture chapters. Like when you're halfway through a murder mystery story, and I don't even like true crime, but when you're halfway through a murder mystery kind of thing, you have to finish it. Like you can't just like, it's like, oh, and then he has his victims doing this. So then Frank Lloyd Wright, like, I don't give a damn. This guy's killing people with chloroform and trap elevators. But yeah, I don't know. How far are you into it? It's
only like 50 pages. The reason why I got so invested in it was because DiCaprio,
they're finally making the movie, right?
He fought major studios so that his production company could get the rights to it because he didn't want he was so obsessed with the story, and it's going to be another DiCaprio Scorsese collaboration. And that is I know it's such a generic answer, but Wolf of Wall Street, Departed, Shutter Island, when they come together, they make magic. So I'm very stoked for the movie adaptation.
Yeah, look, they're good movies. Can't argue with it.
And I meant to read Killers of the Flower Moon before seeing the movie, and I haven't done either. I missed it when it was in theaters, and I also didn't read the book. So this is the next DiCaprio movie where I'm I want to go in knowing the book and then see it executed.
What's funny is I audiobooked it years ago because I think that's when DiCaprio first bought the rights. And I was like, oh, I want to make sure I know this before they make the movie. And that was, I think, at least 6 years ago. I think it was 8 years ago. It's been a long time. Anyway, Percy Jackson. They know they're going to the Windy City. Jason checks that Chicago is where they're going to find the person who controls the winds, and then asks she's who is trapping Hera. And Berea says, those are two different questions, son of Jupiter. And Jason does pick up on son of Jupiter being the call out since before it was son of Zeus. So very interesting stuff there that he has switched to the Roman version. And what Berea says after is the one who controls the winds is in Chicago, but she is only a servant. If they defeat her and they capture the winds, they should go to Aeolus, and he can say where Hera is. He warns that if he does meet who has Hera in the cage, he's not going to like what he finds. So he's warning our crew about what lies ahead. Keone protests. Boreas pushes back since he is in charge, and now it's very clear that they have some sort of ongoing argument. Boreas has Zethes escort them out, and back in the entry hall, we've got Leo and Festus. Leo's all cleaned up. Festus looks normal. Jason sees Leo eyeing up Keone, so he makes a mental note. I should probably tell him that this person sucks. Keone tells Piper that they may have fooled Boreas, but this won't be the last they see of her. Jason calls her spoiled. She storms off. Zethes warns that she never forgets an insult. Cal calls her a bad sister. Jason asks, what's she going to do? Throw snowballs at us? Which feels incredibly Percy Jackson of him to do. But then he does know deep down that she can do worse, which doesn't feel as much Percy Jackson. Percy doesn't necessarily talk crap and then ask questions later. He just talks crap. Jason is at least taking the next step.
Yeah, I guess a son of Zeus would, right? You know, I feel like Zeus is someone who thinks of the before, during, and after, for better or worse. And yeah, Percy's just very instinctual.
Yeah, a little more rough, like the seas. Leo is sad because he wanted to take her to prom. And Piper says, we'll explain later about her whole deal. So Leo then asks, what happened up there? And Piper says, we'll explain later. And Jason then, as the narrator, wonders, what did happen up there? That was wild. And he's confused about the Roman thing. He's all freaking out about the ominousness of the conversation. The Camp Half-Blood concerns seem worrisome to him, that like the gods are toying with him. At least Hera is. So he's very worried. He's worried about the "you will tear each other apart" line, especially since he said it with some delight. And then Jason kind of looks away from Piper, trying to hide his nervousness. And he just says, yeah, we'll explain later. Zethys then warns Piper to be careful, saying that the winds between here and Chicago are ill-tempered, and there's many other evil things that they can face. He says he's sorry that they aren't staying, because she would have made a lovely statue in which he could check his reflection. Fantastic. As someone who has to keep fixing my hair, I get it. You got to find things. I've definitely checked my hair in like windows of outdoor establishments when I'm walking in New York City. Sometimes you got to make do.
Make do. That's like a double meaning right there, right? Hair do, make do.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Didn't even know. That's fantastic. Piper thanks him but says she would rather play hockey with Cal. Cal gets very excited. Piper has to let him know that she was joking. She then asks Zethys, and these storm winds aren't even going to be the worst of our problem, right? And Zethys says, no, something else, something worse. And then Cal just says, worse. Piper gives a little smile and says, can you tell me? And the charm did not work at all this time. And they just shake their heads, and then the hangar doors open. It is nighttime at this point. It is cold. They go out. Festus kind of stomps his feet, looking like he doesn't want to fly. And then Zethys says to them, ask Aeolus what is worse. He knows. Good luck. Super ominous. They are all trained in the King Beret school of ominous sentences to say. And Jason notes a little bit of, I wonder if this guy cares about us. So there's like a little bit of hope, especially because he is infatuated with Piper. There is the hope of the classic henchman that kind of ends up helping you that you don't think is going to. I think there is slight hope for Zethys. I don't have high hopes for Ice Princess, but Zethys and Hockey Cal, there's a chance that these guys come back and are good, which I think is exciting. This is a nice little note to end on in the interaction.
And I will say too, Rick really can't help himself when it comes to leaving a location and having a sense of longing for it, because the line of anxious to get out of that cold penthouse, but he had a feeling it was the most hospitable place they'd see for a while. The recurring line in Percy Jackson was always, had a feeling I wouldn't be back for a long, long time. And it's like, it has been memed to oblivion. I will always like roll my eyes in an endearing way when I reread it. But sometimes it's just like, that's vintage Rick right there.
Right. And what's fun in Percy Jackson, it is that in this, it feels more like, as opposed to we're not going to be back here for a long time, it's more of wherever we're going next is worse. Like, I'll never have it as easy as I did 5 seconds ago. It's how it feels. But yes, Cal pats Leo on the shoulder, tells Leo don't get destroyed, and then says next time, hockey, pizza, which does sound great. And again, a good note for Cal to end on. Like, these guys seem a little friendlier, but then yes, we get this line as they are leaving about them thinking it might be the most hospitable place they see for a while. And then Jason turns and says, come on, guys. Let's go to Chicago and try not to get destroyed. And that is the end of chapter 20. As far as a fun title,
I got one. I thought of it pretty early.
Yeah, what do you got?
Uncle B's Icy Emporium.
Oh,
we'll play on the Lightning Thief, first book of the series.
Love it. Yes, I love it. For me, it just feels like one that would just be kind of straight down the line if it was in the Percy book, and it would just be something like, I learn my patron is toying with me. I feel like in Percy Jackson books, you know it's an oh crap moment sometimes before a chapter. Like, leading into this, you know, like, this is going to be bad, so we don't need to necessarily have a quirky title. I think this could be the perfect time for one that's just straight ominous vibes to go into the ominous chapter. So that's what I've chosen there. But that's the end of this chapter. That's the end of this episode. Liam, this was a delight. Thank you so much for joining. If people want to catch you doing stuff, where can they catch you doing stuff?
I'm on all socials at Liam T. Crowley. That's where I post like all my updates of content and stuff like that. Most prominently on Instagram. That's where I post all my interviews interview clips and stuff like that. By the time you hear this, I have interviews with both Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum for their new movie called Fly Me to the Moon coming out in July. So they will both be live clips on my Instagram, full videos on Comic Book's YouTube channel. So it would mean a lot if you go out and check those out. They tell some pretty great stories about the movie Fly Me to the Moon, and then also like some big stuff about the future of their careers and stuff like that. I won't tease too much because a lot of the information's under embargo. But yeah, those are two big things coming out. And in terms of the Percy Jackson world, I don't have any particular interviews coming up, as right now we are obviously in limbo between seasons 1 and 2 being shot.
But they did like begin production, right? James Bobin hyped it up.
Pre-production is ongoing. I know that like there are people that are back on set and stuff like that. So anything that comes out will be me just kind of reporting on the status of production. So interviews, you know, maybe not for a minute, but I have so much great stuff in the archives. I have interviews with just about everyone who was involved in the cast from season 1. So if you really enjoyed the show, if you're revisiting Percy Jackson on Disney Plus and you want an after show for some of the episodes, I put a lot of work into Riptide Radio that Mike mentioned off the top. It is a live video podcast that exists when the seasons are coming out. So we're in off season right now until season 2. But again, there's 7 episodes of it up because obviously episodes 1 and 2 were grouped together. Yeah. And we have interviews with everyone. Charlie was on to talk about his big heel turn. We had Adam Copeland on to talk about everything with Ares and the fight with Percy on the beach. Just so much great stuff in that podcast. I'm so proud of it. And so it's on hiatus right now. It will be back for season 2. But if you want to go show some love to it, revisiting season 1, that would mean a lot.
Definitely. Check it out. It's some good stuff, fun interviews. And I am glad that you hyped up that stuff in the way you did, because you said out and about. Those are the Boston things you say. You say out in a boat kind of thing. Not like that intense, but that if you're looking for the words of your accent, you've got it. So don't worry. You've got it. You've got like the proper amount of, you know, you get a little bit of the Boston in there, but not so much so where you're packing your car in the harbor or whatever. Oh, man. Well, Liam, thank you so much for joining. Listeners, thank you for listening. And until next time, when they get to Chicago, which I'm very intrigued to see what goes down there, until then, I'll pursue you later. Hello. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Newest Olympian. This podcast is created, hosted, and produced by me, Mike Schubert. I also run the social media and the website. Our editor is Sherry Guo. The music is by Bettina Campamontes and Brandon Grugel, and the art is by Jessica E. Boyd. If you can't get enough of the podcast, you can get involved in a couple of different ways. First, you can support us on Patreon, where you get bonus content. You can go to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon. You can also find us on social media. We're at Newest Olympian on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can go to our website, thenewestolympian.com, to learn more about the show. You can check out live shows that we've got coming near you at thenewestolympian.com/live. You can check out our merch page at thenewestolympian.com/merch. That's also where the TNO coffee lives. And for community stuff, we have a subreddit where you can chat with folks, reddit.com/r/thenewestolympian. And we also have the Discord, which is accessible to all folks on Patreon. Speaking of the Patreon, I want to give a shout out to our folks producing at the highest tier, our producer level patrons. Shout out to Kelsey Gillespie, the Damn Steam Nuggets, Vicky Garcia, Veronica Bartova, Frida Vikstrom, Megan Moon, Craig McRoberts, Taylor Payne, Sabrina Balsiger, Boney Pony, Polly Burridge, Nikki Harris, Tatiana Schmidt, Sandra Rose, Josh Sayer, Josh Wilkie, Abby Ryan, Ashton Gabrielson, Marco Redhouse, Sam Reeby, Riley Kiddes, Mrs. O'Leary, Milo Kim, Sandkopf, Julia Kendall, Rike, John Drillsma, Rayla Matthews, Sky Mallory, Persasabeth, Aiden Parziani, King Bastion, One Damn Distraction Coming Up, Ginger Spursboy, A Cup of Solace, Meg Roy, Bradimus Prime, Skylar Sisters, Scott Sheldon, Sophie, Natanya Page, Ann M. Thayer Cohen, Finley McLeod, Sarah Elise Arnson, Bella, Hayden Neal, Percy Jackson, and Han Haley Hingelheimer Schmidt. If you want to help out the show in a non-monetary way, word of mouth helps the show so much. Whether you post about the show on social media, or you reach out to someone directly, someone who you know is a big Percy Jackson fan, or someone you've been trying to convince to get into the Percy Jackson books, saying, hey, there's this podcast that's called The Newest Olympian. It's really good. You should check it out. Also, you could leave the show a rating and review on whatever podcasting app you're using. Whatever you do to spread the word of the show really does help. I'm appreciative to anyone who has done it in the past, and I'm appreciative to anyone who will do it in the future. But I'm just so thankful that you tuned into this episode, and I hope you tune into our next episode, which won't be next week, but it'll be the week after. Friendly reminder, as I discuss chapters 21 and 22 of The Lost Hero with the fine folks from Monster Donut. But until then, I'll see you later. Hey everyone, how's it going? It's me, ASMR Mike. So there is a tiny little zipper bag that I bring with me on tour. I forget who gave this to me, but someone way back in the Potterless days gave me this purple zipper pouch that has the Potterless logo kind of cross-stitched into the side of it. And I use it for various things on tour, most notably all of the things that go with the merch table, like dollar bills and the square card reader and stuff. So I'm going to do some ASMR featuring this bag. Here's me unzipping it. And then inside right now, here's here's the like ones and fives that I use as change. I'm gonna like through those. And then let's see. Oh, we've got a charging cable that I use for the recording device. I always like to keep it in here so I don't lose it. So I'm just kind of like shuffle and move it around near the microphone. Thank you so much for listening.